Hi, everyone, and welcome today. We are going to do a special report today, and this is a part of the Economic Truth Report, but I think this is a special one that you should take great care of listening to because for once, we're doing a special report, which is on a specific topic, and that specific topic will be on nothing else than what's called the FSB. We're not talking about the former KGB in Russia, but what we're talking about is something called, it used to be called the Financial Stability Forum. And the former head of it was none other than Mario Draghi, scumbag from Goldman Sachs, of course, that now, I don't know what he is. I don't think he's like doing anything anymore in Italy. He was the finance minister just recently, or was it prime minister? I forgot. You guys bright me up on that, anyways. But he created it, and then now it's called the Financial Stability Board. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the aspects of what they're doing, why I believe that's probably one of the most important. Well, it shouldn't be important, but it's one of the most important institutions in the global financial system today, other than the Bank of International Settlements, which funded it, and we'll go into that as well. But the Financial Stability Board, I believe, is probably the number one perpetrator of what we're seeing in the world today when it comes to all kinds of different things like CBDCs, all kinds of regulation that are coming out and so on. So let me get you right into it. We're gonna just step into my presentation. I did this presentation for my good friend David Morgan, Silver Guru, one of the greatest financial minds out there. And now I will give you guys the honor so you guys can hear the same presentation. So yeah, let's get right into it. I'm just gonna put up the screen here, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into presentation mode and get started. So here we go. The Financial Stability Board. All right, so yeah, we got the Financial Stability Board. It's what I call the technocratic elite's control mechanism for global banking, finance, insurance, and accounting. So stay tuned there. This is going to be a very interesting presentation where we're going to go into why I think the FSB is the number one perpetrator, other than, everybody's talking about the World Economic Forum and the UN. Well, we should talk about the Financial Stability Board, because these guys actually makes decisions like on a grand scale. Yeah, you get the agenda pushes from certain people at the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, but the Financial Stability Forum has a lot to say, more than the IMF right now. And they have been very good at putting together. They work through the G20 group to push financial regulation out into the world. And you should just see the network of spider elite, shadow global control financial system that they built for themselves. It's quite astonishing. So you guys will be blown away here. But let's jump into the presentation, guys. Okay, so brief history of the Financial Stability Board. We went quite quickly into it at the start. The Financial Stability Forum was founded in 1999 in Washington, D.C., as a result of a meeting between the G7 finance ministers and central bankers to promote international financial stability. Now, if you go to any, I've been doing huge research on global financial balance sheets for central banks, and when you go to the central banks' websites, you get a interesting thing that I saw that everybody has now, which is a financial stability report. I wonder where that came from. Maybe somebody could enlighten me, but I have a slight suspicion that it comes from the Financial Stability Forum. As you can see here, the Financial Stability Forum was managed by a small secretariat at the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. Initially, it was a dozen members that was a part of it, so kind of a G12. On November 15, 2008, interestingly enough, right after the financial crisis, and actually a book that I highly say that you guys need to read is The Redesign of the Global Financial Architecture by Stu P. McIntosh. if you want to see like who has the sticky fingers, and the reason why the Financial Stability Board came really into and got pushed into the fruition was the 2008 financial crisis, and the central bank, central planners trying to find out how could we, plan more and centrally plan more after we had a massive disaster from central planning. Uh, yeah, so right after, so basically it says here, Washington, in Washington, D.C., of course, during the global financial crisis, the Financial Stability Forum expanded to have emerging economies such as China included. And you can see here to the right, you can see current membership composition of the FSB Regional Consultative Group, for example. You can see that whole list. If you guys want to have more details, you can just look at that list on the video here. So in 2009, during the London G20 summit, the Financial Stability Board was founded. So that's when it really came into fruition, and it included the whole G20 members, whom were not members currently of the FSF group. So basically, at that time, the FSF was kind of like they were trying to come out with ideas and policies on how to make the world even more centrally planned, and sure enough, they did. The Financial Stability Forum met, as it says here, in Rome on 28th to 29th of March 2008 in connections with the BIS memberships. They discussed current challenges in the financial markets and various policy options to address them from this point forward. At this meeting, the FSF discussed a report to be delivered to the G7 finance ministers and central bank governors in April of 2008. The report identifies key weaknesses in underlying current financial turmoil and recommends actions to improve market and institutional reliance. The Financial Stability Forum discussed work underway at the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, with regards to sovereign wealth funds. The International Monetary Fund is working closely with sovereign wealth funds to identify a set of voluntary best practices guides and focusing on governance, institutional arrangement, and transparency of sovereign wealth funds. What a great purpose they had. So after this, so now we kind of jumped a little bit forward, and we're jumping back again just to see what the Financial Stability Forum did. So on April 2012, April 12th, 2008, the Financial Stability Forum delivered a report to the G7 finance ministers, which details its recommendations of enhancing the resilience of the financial markets and financial institutions. These 5 areas were strengthening prudential oversight of capital, liquidity, and risk management. The beautiful academic words there. Enhancing transparency and valuation. Changes in the role and use of credit ratings. That hasn't changed much, has it? Strengthening the authorities' responsiveness to risk. More power. Robust arrangements for dealing with stress in the financial system. So yeah, what a wonderful, thing, that they want to do here. So let's continue. The board now includes all G20 member economies, the FSF member, and the European Commission, hosted and funded at the BIS, so in Switzerland, and is established as a not-for-profit association under Swiss law. So very, powerful they're having that not-for-profit in Switzerland. Okay, so Financial Stability Board represented the G20 leaders' first major international institutional innovations. U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, which I confronted about this stability issue that they have, and they just laughed it off, of course. But Timothy Geithner has described it in effect as a 4th pillar of the architecture of global economic governance. The 4th pillar, very, you need pillars for a solid foundation. I do believe this one is built on maybe with some clay and I don't know, maybe some porous rock or something that's going to be washed out. It's just a little financial wave coming in. But they're trying to save the world, these guys. We've got to give them a break here. Financial Stability Forum has been assigned as a number of important tasks, along working alongside with the IMF, World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. At the 2011 summit in Cannes in France, the G20 called for strengthening the Financial Stability Board's capacity, resources, and governance by establishing the FSB on an enduring organizational basis. In 2012, in its 2012 report to the G20 Los Cabos Summit, the Financial Stability Board set out concrete steps to strengthen the organization's capacity, resources, and governance, as well as establish it at an enduring organizational footing. The G20 endorsed the FSB to be restated and amended charter. In 2013, the FSB became a separate legal entity in the form of an association wherein, under Swiss law, when its articles of associations were adopted by the FSB plenary. So we'll go into how it's all structured and everything in a moment here. The FSB is hosted and funded by the Bank of International Settlements under a 5-year agreement executed between the 2-year in January 2013. The bank bears the majority of the FSB's operation expenses, and the FSB does not have any assets, liabilities, or revenue. In late 2016, after the world markets faced a number of crises, including the terrorism in the UK, UK's decision to leave the European Union, Carney sent a letter to the finance minister attending the G20 summit and to central bank governors outlining that reforms the FSB had made, indicating that the global economy and financial system had continued to function effectively and had weathered the spikes in uncertain risk aversions, confirming that this resilience in the face of stress denominates the enduring benefits of G20 post-crisis reforms. He emphasizes that the value of specific reforms that had been implemented by the Financial Stability Board, stating that these had dampened aftershocks from the global GFC, rather than amplifying them. He expressed that the confidence in the FSB's strategies, stating that the resilience in the face of stress demonstrates that the enduring benefits of G20 post-crisis reforms. The Financial Stability Board have done a good job so far. The Carney man says, that's now he's peddling here in Canada, peddling his green agenda, of course, after been head of the FSB for quite a while. And we're going to go into the structure and more into the details of history and who was involved in the FSB and so on. Now, the FSB published the pre-G20 summit letter in the light of 2 spikes in uncertainty and risk aversion, weathered by the global economy and the financial system as of late 2016, which outlined its priorities for 2016. So let's see what those priorities were. Promote a coordinated program of reforms to deliver resilient sources of market-based finance. Market-based finance, then they gotta, reform it and control it. That's not market-based finance. That's a free market, guys. I think they got their wording wrong here, including addressing structural vulnerabilities associated with asset management. Develop a robust financial market infrastructure, including assessing policies on central counterparty resilience, recovery, and resolvability, and recommending any necessary improvements. Support effective microprudential agreements by drawing lessons from the countries that have applied microprudential policies, framework, and tools, working in partnership with the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of International Settlements. Now, if I read this like Lauren Summers, you'd probably die, and you would, have stopped for a very long time ago. But stay with me. This is the boring part. We're gonna get to some a little more fun, and more stand-up type of fun that we're gonna have, throughout this presentation, because this is so dry that it's like watching paint dry. But I gotta try to make watching paint dry fun for you guys. So bear with me here. In addition to the priorities listed above, the Financial Stability Board also sought to pursue the full, consistent implementation of post-crisis reforms while addressing material unintended consequences, address new and emerging vulnerabilities in the financial system, including those associated with the conduct corresponding banking and climate change, monitor the potential systemic implications of financial technology innovations. Know what that could be, right? And the systemic risk arising from operational disruptions. In November 2016, the Financial Stability Board and the board of the Bank for International Settlements agreed to further 5-year extension of the agreement to from January 2018 to right currently as of this day. So we'll see, will they renew the Financial Stability Board, or will they throw it in the garbage where it belongs? You guys be the the judges of that. I think what you guys want, but I don't think that's what Mark Cartyman and his now Dutch predecessor wants. Yeah, let's go into the charter of the Financial Stability Board and what kind of shenanigans, the chart, what they're up to here. So in the Financial Stability Board Charter objects and mandates, it says Article 1, objectives of the Financial Stability Board. The Financial Stability Board, oh, I wrote twice, sorry guys, is established to coordinate at the international level the work of national financial authorities and international standard setting bodies. We'll go into detail what that is, in order to develop and promote the implementation of effective regulatory, supervisory, and other financial sector policies, and collaboration with the international financial institutions. The FSB will address vulnerabilities affecting financial system in the interest of global financial stability. Sounds so great. Article 2, mandate and tasks of the FSB. As a part of its mandate, the FSB will A, assess vulnerabilities affecting the global financial system and identify and review on a timely and ongoing basis within macroprudential perspective the regulatory, supervisory, and related actions needed to address them and their outcomes. B, to promote, coordinate, and information exchange among authorities responsible for financial stability. C, to monitor, advise on market developments and their implications for regulatory policy. And D, advise on and monitor practice in meeting regulatory standards. E, undertake joint strategic reviews and coordinate the policy development work of the international standard setting bodies to ensure that their work is timely, coordinated, focused on priorities, and addressing gaps. F, set guidelines for and support establishment of supervisory colleges. G, support contingency planning for cross-border crisis management, particularly with the respect to systemically important firms. And we'll talk about that. We'll go into their GSIB list, as it's called, later on here, and how important that is, and how we've seen how that worked already. G, support a contingent. No, sorry. H, collaborate with the IMF to conduct early warning exercises. They really, been working hard here. And early warning exercises like pre-crime or pre-financial crisis. They're very good at that. Guys like we see here, Bernanke and what's his bozo name there, Geithner. That voice, it's quite hilarious because these two, came out right before everything. And it's like, everything is fine. What are you guys talking about? And it's hilarious that the Geithner is involved, of course, with the FSB. Quite funny. And let's see here. Where were we at? Sorry, I got off track there. Too much fun I'm having right here. Yeah, and to promote member jurisdiction and implementation of agreement commitments, standards, and policy recommendations through monitoring of implementation, peer review, and disclosure. And J, undertake any tasks by its members in course of its activities and within the framework of this charter. Now, 2, it says the Financial Stability Board will promote and help coordinate the alignment of activities of the standard setting bodies to address any overlaps or gaps to clarify what is this demarcation in light of changes in national and regulatory structures relating to prudential and systemic risk, market integrity, and investor and consumer protection infrastructure, and as well as accounting and editing. Number 3 says the Financial Stability Board should, as needed, address regulatory gaps that pose risk to financial stability, develop and coordinate development of standards and principles in collaboration with the standard setting bodies and others as warranted in areas which do not fall within the functional domain of another international standard setting body or on issues that have cross-sectoral implications. Okay, now that we got that beautiful thing aboard here, we got now we'll look at the coordination of financial sector policies. We got to get through this dry stuff, and then we'll get into some more, like a lot more dry stuff. So just stay tuned. This is gonna be fun, guys. No, this is very important, actually. This is, you need to follow with me here because we're gonna go probably the deepest I've ever seen anybody talk about. I heard some mentions of the Financial Stability Board and so on. Not very much. These guys are in control over all the policies that you see, and will show you in great detail how that has come out just as recent, with the whole crypto scams and everything that's been out there with SBF and so on. Here you can see, this is hilarious here. I had to, put this up here. You see the same guy from the same office, Randall K. Quarles. Randall Quarles, he was the Federal Reserve's board supervision vice chair, but he's also Financial Stability Board chair. So he has, and you can see he's working hard from the same office. Yeah, it's not a different office. With you got to work from home these days, so of course you got to just give this guy a break. Yeah, we're gonna go more into with the agency and so on in a little bit there, but I think it's important that we go into detail and through everything here, because that'll really bring you to such a depth that I think you'll probably be in the 0.01% of population that actually understand the ramifications of what's going on here. Now, coordination of financial sector policies. The FSB has a unique composition among international bodies because it brings together senior policymakers from ministers of finance, central banks, and supervisory and regulatory authorities for the G20 countries, plus for other key financial centers: Hong Kong, Singapore, Spain, Switzerland. In addition, it includes international bodies, including standard setters and regional bodies like the European Central Bank and the European Commission. This means all of the main players who set financial stability policies across the different sectors of the financial system are at one table. So when policies agreed, they also have the authority to carry them out. The FSB is not a treaty-based organization. Policies agreed by the FSB are not legally binding, nor are they intended to replace the normal national and regional regulatory processes. Instead, the FSB acts as a coordinating body to drive forward policy agenda of its members to strengthen financial stability. It sets international agreed policies and minimum standards that its members commit to implementing at a national level. So don't worry, they'll leave what do I call now, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the CRTC. All these guys have no interest in, telling them what to do, but they'll highly suggest it. The FSB's regulatory reports to the G20, which regularly endorses the FSB's policy agenda and supports implementation of agreed international standards. But the FSB is not run by the G20. Our members is somewhat wider, and the FSB comes to independent policy views on issues. Their outreach activities includes the FSB has set up 6 regional consultative groups, RCGs, enabling us to reach out to authorities in 70 countries and jurisdictions, including a wide range of emerging markets and developed economies, EMDs, which discuss policies while they are still being formulated and effective, or policies that they are being implemented as the FSB itself, central bank supervisors, security regulators, and ministers of finance are members. Our process, the FSB operates through a 3-stage process for the identification of systemic risk in the financial sector, for framing the financial sector's policy actions that can address these risks, and overseeing implementations of those responses. So now, here comes the structure, and this is where it becomes very interesting, guys. Let me just cut quickly here. I'm gonna cut over just 1 second here. Just gonna cut back to myself. So what we went through there was very interesting. We went through the Financial Stability Board. We went through what their structure is and who's involved in the Financial Stability Board. Now, I think it's very important for you guys to think about that for a second and try to contemplate, are they just, another like, really caring agency that are just trying to do everything for the best of the world and so on? Or is there a potential more sinister part of, their behavior here, where they are trying to exert themselves as the United Nations monetary authority on, regulatory body for all finance? Maybe that's it. We'll see. But again, as you see, they clearly have some pretty high goals, but don't worry. It's just suggestions to everybody. So they have no intentions of actually going anywhere and doing something. But yeah, let's get back to the presentation, guys. And this here is this is a very important part of it, because it's more of the actual, it's just a metric that a diagram that I kind of put up just to show you who's involved, all the different partners. And as you can see here on top, let's use our mouse here and move over. As you can see, you got the Group 30, which is another consultative group. I call it the Bilderberg of Finance. They meet every year twice, once at the New York Fed, once somewhere else at a different central bank. A huge group. They have all the central bankers, heads. They have all the CEOs of the chairs of all the banks, plus the top economists in the world that are part of that group 30. So a group of 30, and they are actually run by a guy that I just mentioned, Stu P. McIntosh, which was former at, I forgot what he was. I think he was at FAT. These guys here, Financial Actions Task Force. I gotta love these acronyms that these guys have. So people that are involved there, of course, the European Commission, the IMF, World Bank, OECD, The ECB's banking supervision arm are involved and sits on the board as well, on top of all the central bankers from the G20 and some G20 finance ministers as well. Mostly central bankers are involved in the group. So these guys, they create policies, they implement them, then through their quorum, through into the standard setting bodies, as they're called. So what are these standard setting bodies? There's three main ones that they talk about. And there's more of them that I found over time, but the three main one that they have is the International Accounting Standards Committee Foundation, the International Organization of Securities Commissions, the BIS, so their banking supervision, basically, which the ECB is under. And so we got accounting, and then we got, where's the insurance? Yeah, here we go. The International Association of Insurance Supervisors. Now, what I found after digging a lot, there might be more that I haven't even found, but I found a few extra standard setting bodies, and it's the International Auditing and Insurance Standards Board. It is the NGFS, the Central Banks and Supervisors Network for Greening the Financial System. So there you go. There's a climate change agenda in there. There's the International Organization of Pension Supervisors. That's a part of this. And there's the International Association of Deposit Insurers. That has come out lately, you know, where the FDIC actually makes fun of people that they're so dumb that they don't understand that they can't trust the banks that is being regulated under the so-called deposit insurance. And then we got the Financial Action Task Force, which deals with all kinds of different things with digitalization and with central bank digital currencies, digital identification. Sounds like a little arm of the World Economic Forum's plan, the UN. It might be. And then, of course, these guys go then into the nations of the G20 and even into a lot of the IMF nations through their extended arms and so on, the G7, the G20, and the International Monetary Fund. All right, so let's go to the next clip here. So, who have been, you know, at the Financial Stability Board? And I showed you Randall Quarles. He was, you know, the most former chair from 2018 to 2021. And for 9 years, it was Mark Carney. He was there under, like, he was governor of Bank of England at the time, former governor of Bank of Canada. Mario Draghi, governor of Banca d'Italia, as they call it. And he was an FSB chair from 2009 to 11, and he was also the FSF chair from 2006 to 9. And then earlier, you had Roger W. Ferguson Jr. He was, you know, also vice chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Andrew Crockett, he was the initial guy that started this whole thing, and he was there from 1999 to 2003. Now, is that now this guy quit. I don't know who's taken over actually. If we have, I don't think we have that yet, or if they just said like, you're useless, go home. But under her is the former Secretary General, and of course we got another Secretary General at the World Economic Forum, another Norwegian stooge, but this guy is Svein Andersen. I think he was a former central bank chief in Norway at one point. But now we're going to go and look at the actual structure of the Financial Stability Forum. Now, as you can see here, how it works is, let's start from the bottom up, actually. And as you can see here, there's multiple working groups within the different groups that takes care of different things. So the standards setting bodies on different things. For example, this is the SE standards implementation excuse me, chair, and then he has working groups underneath him. Then you got the SC budgets and resources. They got also working groups underneath him. You got the SC assessing vulnerabilities group. So we got working groups under there, supervisor and regulatory corporation. We got several groups under there. Now, all those groups, they are part of the plenary, which also has the regional consultatory groups that are in Asia, Americas, Middle East. So we've got the MENA, as they call it, Sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, and CIS, which is Russia and Middle East. Is it? No, it's not. Sorry, the CIS. I'm not sure what that is exactly. I know that there's just these acronyms that these globalists like to use. But so they got the plenary, so just sitting there in the group, and then what they do is like, here's what we propose. Then the steering committee then actually comes in, and the steering committee, well, they make a decision in the plenary. The steering committee gets that, and now the steering committee and says like, okay, let's go forward with this, this, and that. Maybe not that. And then what happens is you got the secretariat, which is Dietrich Domanski. That's probably the guy that took over for Svein Andersen, by the way. But the steering committee then pushes it forward for Klaus Knott, which is the current head of the Financial Stability Board. And as you can see, he's the president of the Dutch Central Bank. So he then gets it and he just pushes it and says like, yeah, let's do this. Let's push these ideas and regulations forward to the standard setting bodies at the G20 group and so on. And so that's how, their whole working process works to create more laws, create more regulation and central planning. Here's just this is from their own website, and this was as of 2nd of December 2021. Again, you can see here the current heads and so on of the different consultant groups. I'll show you that actually quickly in a bit. You got the current chair, which is Klaus Knott. He is, so let's just read quickly into this and what they do. The chair is the principal spokesperson for the FSB and represents the FSB externally. So he's the guy that goes around and talks to everybody about how great the FSB is and how you need them. He is selected from the representatives and the plenary and appointed by the plenary for a term of 3 years, renewable once. And as you can see, there's, what's his name there? Mark Carney is the only one that really had that. They could convenes and chairs the meetings of the plenary and the steering committee and oversees the FSB secretariat. He may concurrently serve in different role for a member, for example, as the central bank governor while he's the chair. So don't worry, there's no there's no collusion here. Don't worry. Then the steering committee. The steering committee provides operational guidance between plenary meetings to carry forward the directions of the AFSB and prepare the plenary meetings in order to allow the plenary to effectively fulfill its mandate. The steering committee also is responsible for monitoring and guiding the process of ongoing work, promoting coordination across standing committees and working groups, and commissioning work therefrom, ensuring effective information flow to the full membership, and coordinating and conducting reviews of policy development work of the international standards setting bodies. Okay, sounds like fun. Then we got the standard committees, and now you can see these are the current. I don't believe it's the current. They were the current for just like 5 months, 3-4 months ago or something. But this lady might be very familiar with most of you, and it's Lael Brainerd from. She's governor of the U.S. Federal Reserve Board. She sits on the Standing Committee on Assessment of Vulnerabilities, the SCAV committee. Sounds like a weapon, actually. Very dangerous weapon. Scav, you don't want to get hit by the scav. You might die. Anyways, SCAV is FSB's mechanism for monitoring and assessing vulnerabilities in the global financial system and proposing to the plenary the action needed to address them. The SCAV has responsibility for monitoring and assessing vulnerabilities affecting the global financial system and proposing to the plenary actions needing to address them, monitoring and advising on market and systemic developments and implications for regulatory policies, and providing input for early warning exercises conducted in collaboration with the International Monetary Fund. Then we got the Standing Committee on Supervisory and Regulatory Cooperation, the SRC. Sounds like another regular, yeah, that's exactly what it is, just on a global level. Current chair is Andrew Bailey, governor of the Bank of England. I don't know if he currently is that because there's been a lot of shaking around in England after their total collapse of their financial system. But anyways, Bailey's there, and what his responsibilities are, because as a central banker, you're very responsible for the stability. No, not stability. It's the total opposite. Instability of the markets, but they like, to call things the opposite of what they are. So the responsibility for this SRC committee is addressing key financial stability issues relating to the development of supervisory and regulatory policy, identifying relative priorities, and seeking to ensure that different policy initiatives fit together into a coherent whole. Assisting managing the coordination issues that arises among supervisors and regulators on issues that have cross-sector implications and rise any need for policy development required to close regulatory gaps and to pose risk to financial stability. Setting guidelines for overseeing the establishment and effective functioning of supervisory colleges, and advising and monitoring best practices in meeting regulatory standards with a view to ensure consistency, cooperation, and level playing field across jurisdictions. So we need equality in financial regulation. Of course, that is so they could control more. Okay, then we got the Standing Committee on Standards and Implementation, the SCSI. Their responsibility is ensuring comprehensive and rigorous implementation and monitoring of international financial standards agreed by G20, FSB commitments, recommendations, and initiatives in consulting and coordination with the relevant bodies through mechanisms such as the coordination framework for implementation monitoring, the CIFM. These guys, just way too many acronyms here, and of course, they create such elaborate, labyrinths of, deception, and making it very hard to understand what's going on here. But I understand quite well, and I think you're starting to get it as well, that this is the biggest, control grid that they've built so far. Yeah, let's get back here. Undertaking peer reviews among FSB members, reporting to the plenary members, commitments and progress in implementing international financial standards agreed by the G20 FSBs and recommendation and other initiatives. So it's like, yeah, they don't worry. The local regulators, they're totally independent, but he is, reporting on the progress of the implementation of international financial standards that they, pushed to be like, hey, just take this or go. Look, don't worry, we're not pushing or anything, but we would like for you to do this, please, right now. Encourage global adherence to prudential, regulatory, and supervisory standards, such as through the FSB framework for strengthening adherence to international standards. And then we got more. There's more committees. And so we got the Standing Committee on Budget and Resources, the SCPR, very important part of course. And of course, we forgot that the head of the SCSI is Fahad Al-Mubarak, which is governor at the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia. And then we got the Standing Committee on Budget and Resource, the SCBR, and the guy that's the current chair of that is Thomas Jordan. And Thomas Jordan, he's the chairman of the governing board at the Swiss National Bank. Now, the SCBR, they're providing the plenary with assessment of resource needed of the FSB Secretariat, taking into account the current mandate and the work program and emerging demands, reviewing medium-term budget and resource framework, as well as annual resource budget for the FSB Secretariat, with due regard to cost control for approval by the plenary. You know, they're very frugal over there at the FSB. Meanwhile, their central bank counterparties just print reserves out of thin air. I love the frugality. Yeah, anyways. And then, yeah, here we go. Identifying, evaluating, and recommending to the plenary options for independent raising of resources by the FSB over the midterm to supplement funding received by the BS. So they're getting some extra funding. Who are funding them? I haven't actually snooped enough for that probably, but maybe there's, you know, the Bill Gates and other little munchkins around there, you know, globalists, you know, pushing some extra cash into, you know, creating this global regulatory body, ensuring through appropriate agreements necessary transparency in the matters of financial governance of the FSB, so to be able to withstand public scrutiny. Public scrutiny. You know, how much public scrutiny have they gone under? Not much. Not much. All right. So let's get to this, talk about the Secretariat at the FSB. And the Secretariat, the Secretariat is directed by the Secretary General and is located in Basel, Switzerland. I think it's actually located, Secretariat is hosted by the Bank of International Settlements and currently has 33 members, including a deputy to the Secretary General. A majority of the members on the Secretariat are on secondment from the FSB member authorities. So they basically have other rules as well. Now, of course, I believe they have a room in at the Tower Basel there at the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS. But what they do, the Secretariat, is support policy development and activities of the FSB, committees, regional consultative groups, and working groups, facilitate cooperation amongst members between FSB and other institutions, ensure efficient communication to members and others, maintain organizational records, and administer the website and deal with correspondence of the FSB, and manage efficiently the financial, material, and human resources allocated to the FSB by everybody else, by you know, G20 members, I guess. The General Secretary, which here we go, is Dietrich Domanski, a Polish guy. I don't know if he lives in Poland or not. Doesn't say, but let's go further into it here anyways. He's the Secretary General, and he directs the Secretariat act in accordance with the instructions of the FSB and appoints secretarial staff. Very important, you know, to have Domanski there. He's like the HR guy. At the, you know, it'd be nice to have one day at the FSB, you know, like the office, you know, but just the FSB, and see what's happening there. It'd be quite amusing. If somebody wants to make like at Hollywood or somewhere, have the brains to put this together, let's do it. It'd be amusing for me anyways. I would pretty much enjoy it quite a bit. All right, so we saw initially, we showed you this list, and it's the memberships by the regional group nations. So this is the extended consultative groups. You got the main ones, which are already a part of the group, which is of course Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, the United States, Australia, China, Hong Kong SAR, Indonesia, India, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Russia, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Spain, Switzerland, United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and South Africa. And so, yeah, they just got rid of Russians, didn't they? Pesky Russians. Well, they're part of this little group here. You know, they got the same implementations in Russia as everywhere. Here are some of the members again. I don't know how much I should go into this. You could just see here, as you can see, there's people that are, you know, deputy secretaries of treasuries in certain countries. You see the chair here of the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, members from, it seems like it's both, yeah, it's both members from the financial ministry and the central bank. And also you can see here, there is people for Canada, for example, that is Keith Rutledge, which is the superintendent, or the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, the OSFI, which is a standard setting body in Canada. In China, same thing. You got so you see a regulator, like some countries have a regulator, they have the finance ministry and the central bank as members, basically. And you can see that that's the case for most of these, not all of them, but France, Germany has it. You have India has the same. Indonesia doesn't. Italy has that. Let's go further. Japan, Korea doesn't have all of it. Neither does Mexico. Netherlands doesn't either. Russia does have members. And as you can see here, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, Turkey, UK, the United States, and then comes the international ones, the IMF, World Bank, BIS, OECD, ECB, and then the ECB Banking Supervision Standard Setting Body, the SSM, European Commission, Basel, yeah, the Supervisory Committee in Basel, the AIIS, the AOSCO. You got the International Accounting, the IISB. You got the Committee on Global Financial System. You got the Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructures. And then here is the regional consultative groups, whose chairs are those. As you can see, there's most of them are co-chairs. And yeah, you can see the Cayman Island Monetary Authority, so the Central Bank of Cayman Island, RBI, Central Bank of the Philippines. You got here the head of Russian Fed. Yeah, so that's what CIS is part of. Oh, Commonwealth Independent States. So why is Russia there? Is Russia part of Commonwealth? I'm not sure. There, you got head of deputy governor of. So basically, if you're like basically one step under the head of the central bank, or you're right there, like you'll be a part of these groups as well. Swede here for Europe. Let's continue. You got Mina. There you have the head of Central Bank of Turkey, Central Bank of Tunisia, Central Bank of South Africa, Ghana. Ghana's doing very well right now, destroying themselves. Okay, so that's a little bit of the structure. As you can see, there's a huge consortium of these globalists that are now created and taken over, and since 2008, when they really started to fast forward and really push using a crisis, the global financial crisis, they created a tremendous, excessive, huge international governing body that have a lot to say. Let's just leave it at that around the world. Now we're gonna go into. I think I'm gonna show you a video next here And so let's look quickly at the video that explains a little bit what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll go into some of their actual policies that they push forward. And then you can see they really will build a big picture of what we have today, because they're very important things that we hear all the time. So let's play this video. Sorry, guys. Where do we, oh, we gotta, yeah, just watch. Oh, it plays directly. Perfect. So this is the FSB. Oopsie. Actually, let me just double check this, because I think I don't have the audio shared properly. Let me just go back here. Sorry for interruption, guys. I'm actually just doing this on the whim, by the way, because it's such an extensive report that, well, I've done it a couple of times now, but let's go back here and quickly just reshare it to make sure, because I don't think I optimized the sound for you guys, which is very important, so you get to actually hear what they're saying here. So let's just go back and play it again. But again, this is the FSB explained and why it's so great that we need it. And it's a wonderful entity.
If the financial system can't withstand economic shocks, the results are catastrophic. 10 years ago, when the global financial crisis hit, it spread panic for a banking system built on weak foundations. Global production plummeted. Around the world, the number of people who lost their jobs soared. People took to the streets as governments around the world had to use public funds, your money, to save banks from failure in order to prevent a global depression. A decade on, has anything changed? In short, yes, and here's how. G20 countries, through the Financial Stability Board, have rebuilt the financial system so that it serves society, not the other way round.
So nice.
By fixing the fault lines that caused the crisis, the financial system is now safer, simpler, and fairer. How is the financial system safer?
Meanwhile, people are getting poorer and poorer, by the way.
A safe banking system needs to have enough capital. That's the money that bank owners put on the line to absorb unexpected losses. So that they can withstand economic shocks, large banks now need to have 10 times more capital than before. In addition, a decade after the crisis, G20 reforms have brought shadow banking, bank-like activity that was away from the gaze of regulators, into the light. Relative to where we were in 2007, the toxic parts of shadow banking have shrunk by 40% and been made safer. And through various reforms, other shadow banking activity has been transformed into resilient, market-based finance that is more transparent, robust, and useful to the real economy than before.
Go hide yourselves.
How is the system simpler?
There's no market-based finance.
The complexity of the financial system meant that when the crisis hit, distress
free market doesn't
rapidly.
exist.
The G20 reforms are driving change. Take the $500 trillion global market for derivatives contracts, which companies use to manage their risks.
As Lawrence Summers likes to say.
Before the crisis, derivatives formed a complex and fragile web between banks. If one big bank were to go down, panic followed because no one knew which other banks might be next. A decade on, we've untangled this web to create a simple hub-and-spoke model, where these trades now go through single central counterparties. Now, if a big bank fails, the rest carry on operating as before. What about a fairer
what if the central counterparty
system?
fails?
A decade ago, it was heads I win, tails you lose for the big banks. They enjoyed high profits during good times, but during tough times, they relied on government bailouts because they were too big to fail. This had to change, and it is. We're nearing the point where large banks can fail without bringing down the rest. Today, it is no longer the taxpayers, but the bank's investors who would foot the bill for the failure. And you can see this in the biggest banks' credit ratings, which show the fall in the subsidies. A decade on, market discipline is back. What about bankers' pay? Before the crisis, bankers were paid generous cash bonuses regardless of the long-term risks involved. This encouraged short-term thinking, contributing to the global financial crisis. But now, there are new international standards which mean that bonuses awarded today are paid out in instalments over a number of years, and bonuses can be clawed back if it emerges that senior people haven't behaved responsibly. While there
Oh,
remains more to be
nice.
done, a decade on, individual responsibility is returning. To summarise,
I love they use
G20
individual
countries have led a reform
responsibility when
effort to
it's all
fix the
about
fault lines
central
that caused the last
responsibility.
crisis. The financial system is now safer, simpler, and fairer. But
Until
just
it's
as a
not.
footballer needs to focus on where the ball was going, not where it is now, we are scanning the horizon for new and emerging risks and addressing them before they get out of hand.
Now I get it. I understand soccer.
That way, the financial system can
So we're in good
concentrate on serving
hands.
households and businesses, so you can concentrate on what really matters to you.
Oh, well, that's nice. I'm very happy to hear that the FSB got our best interest and that they will make sure that we're safe. Okay, so let's skip to the end here.
If the financial system
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So now we go into the important part here, where the rubber hits the road, which is basically the Financial Stability Board's list that they create annually. They created it since 2018, and that is the GSIB list, the globally systemically important banks, and those are the ones that will get bailed out if we have problems. And sure enough, if we go back and look at the 2019 September 17th repo blow up, all these members are on there magically. And it was all, of course, a bailout that was structured through the Federal Reserve and then through the rest of the bank. Like they have then swap lines and all this stuff to then bail out other central banks that then bail out their banks locally and so on through, using this list. Because if you go and look at the bailouts of 2019, I have stats on that. You can find that on my website. But you can actually find all these members that were bailed out through the repo facility at the Federal Reserve. And then, of course, the overnight repo turn into then terms that then turn into outright purchases. Now, see the central bank balance sheet of the Federal Reserve and other central banks, which I'm doing a comprehensive research on right now, putting up most of the big central banks in the world, all the data and so on. You've seen their balance sheets have just ballooned into pretty epic levels, the thousands of percent since 2008. And of course, yeah, everything is so safe because the central banks are owning more and more of the assets in the world. Everything's fine. So so if you look at this, you could see different banks here. You probably see you're familiar with most of these banks, but we're going to focus on the 2022. It just comes out every November. And as you could see here, is that there's banks moving up and down on these ladders. These are like counter-cyclical capital buffers. It's an extra buffer that they have to have for global regulation and all this fun stuff. And they trust the banks to have this, of course. And as you can see, JP Morgan is the highest. That is the #1 bank in the world that is mostly systemically important. It's not #1, it's #4. And that is JP Morgan Chase. That needs the biggest buffer. If they collapse, everything collapses, blah, 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 blah. And then we see in the bracket below, there's, a little bit less of a buffer that they need on top of whatever other buffer they have. Now the banks doesn't even have, the old type of, what the heck, fractional reserve banking. It got a zero reserve policy now, which in the United States, that was one of the last that had that, changed in May of 2020 when they had the repo blow up into the so-called lockdown, the COVID, which is basically government lockdowns that created that. But so what you see here is you got in the third tier, you got Bank of America, Citigroup, HSBC, and then in tier 2, you got Bank of China, Barclays, BNP Paribas, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, ICBC. You got MUFG, which is I believe they're Japanese. I think ICBC. I don't know exactly where they're from. I think they're Asian bank. And then in the lowest tier of the banks that will get bailed out by central banks, because we don't do taxpayer bailouts anymore, which they have though to certain extents during COVID. Still, But you have Agricultural Bank of China there. You got Bank of New York Mellon, China Construction Bank, Credit Suisse, Group BPCE, Credit Agricole, ING, Mitsu, FG, Morgan Stanley, Royal Bank of Canada, Banco Santander, Societe Generale. You got Standard Charter, State Street, Sumitomo, Mitusi. You got TD Bank in Canada. You got UBS, Unicredit, and Wells Fargo. So that is the list. So keep this in mind. This is the grand poobah of who will get bailed out, who's the too big to fail banks, as the TBTF, as they're also called. But this group calls it GSIB, and by just complete like I looked at the numbers that finally came out, like I think it was like a year or so after the whole blow up in the repo market. You then saw like these institutions were on that list. So very important list, guys, to follow when it comes to global bailout structure. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at just quickly. I'm not going to go into all this because it's just too much, and it'll take like hours upon hours upon hours to go through everything here. But these are some of the what do you call it, policies that have been put forward by the Financial Stability Board, and one of the ones here that I have is called a draft framework for money laundering, terrorist financing, risk assessment, remittance corridor. So basically looking at money remittances, how to control it, and so on, and setting up, premises of how to do it, the AML, KYC, all this fun stuff that they have. What's nice though is that you can actually look at this whole presentation. You could click on it, find directly links to the actual documents themselves on their website. So there's no doubt that I'm not fibbing here and making stuff up. This is pulled directly out. I just copy paste into here from the report to make just a few points to see, so you can see what's going on and what they're discussing here. The objective of remittance corridor risk assessment, for example, AML, and then they got their CFT, ML, TF, and I got all their beautiful acronyms there. Customer due diligence, CDD. We're gonna do some CDD on John before we trust him as a customer. And then here, this is the, as you can see, is this playing? Yeah, it's actually playing. It's showing, this is the global monitoring report on non-bank financial intermediation. It just shows total financial assets. I do believe, is this the derivatives markets? It might be. But again, you can see here they have a report that they created on non-bank financial intermediation to 2021, and you can see the total assets are growing, on quite the scale. I think it's 2020. Yeah, 2020 was the last one. So again, and then as you can see here, there's lots of data. Just cut some out for you, so you can really see the depth of what they actually, like the power that they have here with the individuals that they have, and how much they actually go through on a regular basis, because there's a lot, as you can see. They have a lot of data points, which you don't really get from not very many. The BIS is the only one, that has stuff like this. And of course, they lean on that, plus all the other financial authorities that are around. And so this is that one. And then you have another report here, 2021 resolution report, glass half full or still half empty. They're looking at where they're at. Recently we heard the guys at the what do you call it? The FDIC, the Financial Deposit Insurance. What is it called again in the United States? The FDIC. Anyways, the FDIC had a board meeting that got. I don't think it was leaked, but it's public. But it got out there, and they were like, oh, like the stupid public doesn't, we trust the banks way less than the public, and we shouldn't really tell them what's going on, or else they'll panic and create a bank run, for example. And they were talking about the TLAC. There's beautiful words that they like to throw out. And TLAC actually comes from the Financial Stability Board. I think I might have it in some slide here later on. But TLAC came from that, and it's total loss absorption control, which basically means if a bank completely fails, how do you then divide everything, and then also it has in it the what do you call it, the bail-in protocols of what to do to steal people's money that they lost basically. And here you can see their exposures of different banks. You see Morgan Stanley and um, Goldman Sachs are pretty high up. So you can see there's some issues there probably. But yeah, that's the resolution report, and it's everything fine. We need more regulation, more regulation, more regulation is basically the solution. And they're talking about central counterparties, how they're creating all these clearing houses around the world. Here you can see the major clearing houses, central clearing partners of world finance, and where they actually clearing excuse me, their trades and so on. And as you can see here, you got in Spain, you got something called the BME clearing. You got CC and GB in Italy, CME in the United States. You got the Eurex clearing in Germany, Euro CCP in Netherlands. You got the HKFE clearing corporation in Hong Kong. You got the ICE Clear Credit in the United States, ICE Clear Europe in the UK, the LCH Ltd in the UK, the LCH SA in the France. You got Nasdaq Clearing in Sweden, Operational Clearing Corporation in the United States, and then 6X Clear in Switzerland. And here you can see jurisdictions that they represent. So they got a lot of data, and it's very, you really see how insane the global financial system is, and all these, like how the FSB's gotten their tentacles into, how they're talking to and basically regulating, I would say, the global financial system. They can say all they want. They're like, no, we just advise what should be done. We never would regulate anything, but they basically create the rules that you should play by. Yeah, proposed legislation for central clearing partners of world finance. And as you can see here, there's the resolutions. We're not going to go into too much work to just go into detail. If you guys want me to, you just go into detail on this last part of the presentation. Please let me know, and we could do an extra one to the side. But I don't think that's very necessary. You guys can go and do all your research in these groups. And as you can see here, these are all legislations that have come out of course, the Financial Stability Board. So now here's the big one, that everybody is probably familiar with and heard talks about, is the bail-in execution practices paper. And who came up with it? Well, the Financial Stability Board tells everybody how you should properly bail in a bank when it fails. And basically, they call it recapitalization here in Canada. It's a nice, fine word for it. Basically, it's like the bank lost money. They lost their depositors' money that they don't really have. And so they have to bail in, take a whole bunch of the cash that's available to then, pay for the losing bets. And this is how the process works. It's very high level, how to actually deconstruct how it exactly will work on certain different levels there and certain different bank types. Yeah, it talks about that in great detail. Again, you could read all this in the presentation itself together with my commentary here. More bail-in. I just thought it would be just valuable for you guys to actually see how the papers are, take some of the highlights of these papers and then showing you how intricate the work is on really like putting it to the decimal of where and what to do for these different banks. We're still at the bail-in legislation here. It talks about different bonds and so on. Here's links to all of the different bail-in legislations that have been put into different countries, for example. And here is this one just came out recently, was the crypto asset markets. And they were talking about regulation on crypto markets. And sure enough, it came out right after SBF was caught stealing everybody's money. And sure enough, they had this regulation already. This is from 2018, actually, I believe. This started, as you can see below. And it just goes into, you know, how we're going to control them, who's going to control, you know, the crypto exchanges and all these bodies. Like, what about ATMs? What about all these other stuff that, you know, has to do with it? Here's a metric, and how to monitor everything, and so on. Price levels, ICO position. It's, you know, like who's gonna of the current entities that are out there, who's going to be in control of everything. As you can see here, the BIS, because they're banking supervisory entity, the BIS, it seems like they're going to have a control of most of the crypto when everything comes out. Internal interconnectedness in resolution planning for insurers. So they're talking about how to deal with a failing insurer, which is quite interesting. So in detail, you could click again on the link at top here. And then here it just shows you, this is actually a layout of how it works, like how everything works if you get issues with you know, crashes of systems being down, and what's going on, and how, you know, like you dispute different things, and if things collapse, how you do it, and so on. Very interesting and intricate. This is the TLAC, that everybody's talking about at the FDIC there. And it just talks about, you know, how you should structurally take a bankrupt bank and create it into different and create different things, you know, make sure that they have buffers, blah blah blah, so everything's fine and everything's safe and dandy. And yeah, that's about it. You know, the FSB, if you want to write to them, you know, here's the address. You could give them a call, you know, and ask them, see if they're having a nice day over there in Switzerland. Probably having a good time now, you know, with the Davos being there and everybody's hanging out with Klaus and the boys, of course, up there in beautiful Davos, Switzerland. And here's, you know, their LinkedIn page. They even have a Twitter if you're interested. So yeah, the FSB, guys, is a very important institution in today's world economy. And so I just thought it was very important for you to have all the information, and then also be able for you guys to put uh, some of the things together, you know, that you've seen around the world, like you see legislation popping up. I tried to follow macros, so I follow, like, suddenly legislation pops up in one country, then suddenly over in another country. It's because of the FSB and their push to, you know, basically become the global regulator or everything. You know, I got the global United Nations and the global government over there that are trying to be in development. So again, the building the infrastructure is being built very heavily, and it's been built quite substantially, as you can see, for a global financial regulator on all these different entities, as you can see. So just be prepared. This is their battle for the global government has just you know, started with all of these entities that they have. So be prepared for that. And I just thought you'd be you know, interested to see what's going on a global level. And of course, I don't know who you are, if you're sitting at a bank or if you're working as a hedge fund manager, if you even know about a lot of these stuff, because the FSB is not talked about so much. Of course, there's a lot of you guys that probably know it, but then of course, all of us useless eaters or peasants out there, we don't really understand this or know too much about it. So I thought it was would be very interesting to go and do a deep dive, a little bit of a deep dive. We didn't go into the legislation and stuff because that would probably make 99% of the people watching fall asleep. But I thought that, you know, it was a more of a general, you know, overview over the FSB and what they do and some of their policies that, you know, people might be familiar with or heard about that they created already. And to quote, you know, Stuart P. McIntosh about, you know, the FSBs, you know, it's way better than the IMF because there's less cooks in the kitchen, as he quoted in his book, The Redesign of Global Financial Architecture, The Return of State Authority. Very good book. You should all read it. And now his new book is called Climate. What is it called? Climate Crises. I forgot his Climate Crisis Economics. Is the new books of Steve P. They're over at the G30 group. So yeah, please guys follow. I hope you really enjoyed this, and please, you know, if you found this information very helpful to understand, you know, what's going on, Meanwhile, you're watching your local regulators, and you're working, let's say, in insurance, in any kind of financial industry. You sell in investments or whatever you do, or investing. I think it's important to understand what's going on here. That it's not just the SEC that's over here. It's all of them together. Talking about this with the FSB forum, and what these guys do. So it's a global game plan. I believe that, yeah, they just want to create a global regulator, and as you see, all the big players of all the central banks are in it, and that's cooks in the kitchen better for any totalitarian entity, right? So, yeah, stay tuned, guys, and make sure that you follow everything that I do, and please donate if you really like this type of work. Going into deep dives onto entities like this, because 99% of people, probably in the financial industry, haven't heard about the FSB and so on, and what they're doing up there in Switzerland, among other entities that are hanging out in Switzerland. So it's very important. And yeah, so feel free, go to my website, theeconomictruth.org. You'll find everything there. All my work, I do a lot of work now on financial stuff. I did some good charts on derivatives and so on, and issuance of different derivatives, issuance of, I use SIFMAs, which is a derivatives kind of authority in the United States that look at numbers and get all numbers. So I do that. I do a lot of other stuff. I recently looked at, I looked at debt interconnectedness through the biz. I haven't done that in a few years, but there's so much work. If you go to my website, click on Infogram, for example, you'll find all my free work that I have available. And then, of course, I have a few paid reports. One of the most important reports that I've been creating as of late is a global central banking report, which has 77 of the global central banks that I try to track on a yearly basis, their balance sheet, their trends and so on. And also, I try to not go into all of them, but into about like 30, 40 of them, and look at, how their balance sheets are composed, what they have for assets. And also I'm looking at, the trends within them, and some of them I actually have data for 10, 20, 30 years, that you can look at their balance sheet, for example. Everything is downloaded in the report. You really need to check it out. It's only $100 Canadian, and that report is top notch. It also has all the global gold reserves of central banks as well, for you to be interested in seeing what's going on, what are central banks doing around the world, not just, the Fed or the top three or whatever you hear about, right? So I think it's very necessary to go in deep dives into this, and maybe do a deep dive into my report as well at one point, if you're willing to, give a little bit of a payment to have that kind of information coming out. So stay tuned, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk soon.